for me personally, it's been a pretty hectic couple of weeks with what's going on up there. If you haven't paid attention, please pay attention. There's a lot of great organizations doing a lot of work with artists and musicians that have been ravaged by this. If you aren't aware, there are no official shows in Asheville for the next foreseeable future. We're thinking maybe all the way through Christmas. So keep all those good people in your thoughts and support whatever's going on up there. And yeah, let's get into this thing. So this is shaping the future of indie. And as a journalist myself, this is a huge topic because if you're my age, which is approaching 40, we've seen the high water mark and the complete collapse of the music industry. And as things rebuild on the corporate side, things have also blossomed on the indie side. There's a lot of DIY, there's a lot of people doing their own path, there's a lot of people trying their own templates, and a lot of it's working. And it's interesting to see how it's able to compete and also flourish with everything else going on the major level. So let's introduce our folks here on the panel. We have Sherry Hu, founder of Water and Music, one of the leading providers of tech research consulting and education in the music industry. We have Andrew Beatty, founder and co-CEO of BTAP, successful entertainment and tech entrepreneur. And we also have Joel Jordan, the founder of Think Tank, co-founder of Earth Program, creative problem solver, design leader, and tech innovator in the music and media industry. Hello. A round of applause.
Thank you. All right, I'll start with softball. Where are we? This landscape has been choppy, and it's been odd and weird and good and bad to navigate in the last 20 years. What do you see when you look at the landscape? We'll start with you, Sherry.
Sure. Thank you so much, Garrett. Thanks so much to Confluence for having all of us. I'm going to do, I guess, a very brief intro of Water Music, also just for context, because that'll definitely inform how I think about the independent music landscape. So, Water Music, my company focuses on music and tech research. By that, we mean everything across the whole value chain of the music industry. So, how technology is changing everything from music creation to distribution and marketing, and a lot of understanding the relationship between music and tech, especially looking at the next 5 to 10 years, can be understood by looking at how it's impacting the lives of independent artists and their ability to make a living, to reach and engage with fans today. At Water Music, we also follow the money a lot as part of our job, like who is making money from the music business today, how are they getting that money, how much, and how is that evolving over time. So thinking about like the state of independent music today, thinking very high level, it's definitely not black or white, I think would be my take. Like it's not all good, it's definitely not all bad. There are a lot of really good case studies. But if you break down the industry by specific sectors, for example, so in recording and live, let's just look at those and like aggregate revenue figures in particular and what's being recorded. We're seeing that both of those sectors are actually becoming more consolidated over time. So like the 3 major record labels, Universal, Warner, and Sony, they've been buying out a lot of independent distributors and music companies and also have been growing their superstar roster artists even more. So that leads to them commanding, depending on the year, like a 75 to 80% share of the entire recorded music market, just in the top 3 companies. So even though there's a deluge of new artists and content entering the market, there's still even more consolidation of power and of revenue. Live, I think, with the last panel, just in general with the current industry landscape, definitely the influence of bigger companies and promoters like Live Nation and AEG, consolidation also is continuing in live. In contrast, if you look at areas like fan engagement and kind of direct marketing to audiences and to fans, I think that's actually an area where the independent sector is like really winning out and actually beating the major, bigger corporations at their own game. I was listening in on the last panel, and a big theme, which is true in live, but now is also translating to digital, is the value people see in not just like renting audiences from these larger mass market social media platforms to handle their marketing, but instead prioritizing direct connections with their fans. Things like email, which has been around for decades, is now like touted as the new hot channel to invest in at every level. And you're seeing like James Blake recently has been speaking out a lot about the importance of direct fan relationships. Lana Del Rey recently actually moved her fan data away from Universal Music Group, which used to handle it, and to a music startup called OpenStage, which is helping build a lot better technology around fan data management. So those are just two examples of how, like, not only are independent artists really leading the conversation around fandom and community, but bigger artists now are recognizing that and are trying to catch up accordingly. So in terms of the state of indie, it's definitely a nuanced conversation, not like that.
Andrew, what do you see right now in the current landscape? I know that's a loaded question, but it's definitely a sincere one.
I also for context, I guess, I'm the founder of BTAP. We're the leader in fraud detection for the music industry. So we actually sit on top of most of the major streaming services and look at all the unique plays that are occurring and all the user data. So we get everything from like battery life, gyroscope, what orientation your phone was in when you played, every single thing you did in-app before and after, how you searched that artist. We're sitting on about 40 trillion user events per year right now and 4 trillion streams. So no longer like a sample, but a true census of the market. And we evaluate who's manipulating stream counts and where that money is moving. 80% of the fraud that we catch is from the independent sector, almost all from financial scammers, like not actually the music industry, but people using DIY platforms to get their music on the streaming services and then run scams against it. Less than 1% of all fraud is coming from the majors or major distributed content. So it's truly like organized crime, cartels from South America, terrorist groups, Russian mob. Like these guys are moving and stealing money from the music industry and making it look like independent artists. So my view is maybe uniquely biased in that while we've been on paper seeing this indie movement, I argue that a majority of it is actually fraudulent. And there's a lot of fraud that looks like it's independent music that's taking off, but it's not actually independent music. So my view is more aligned with what you were saying with consolidation, in that the majors are consolidating a lot more. The money is actually being concentrated around the bigger players, and the independent market is actually not growing like everyone's been thinking it's growing. And I think a lot of that's just been fake data. And so I think I have a unique view for that. And so my view is that independent artists have a lot of cool things like with fan engagement and tools that they can use to break out. The democratization of being able to be an artist has been huge for artists. Like you wouldn't have big breakouts that come out of nowhere without that. Like it's made it easier for people to enter, but with that door open has made it easier for fraud. And I think all of that's made it really noisy for everyone else to identify who's a real artist, who's not a real artist, how do we take a chance on this person and not that person. Random aside, but I know someone who faked a bunch of streams and then stole $1 million advance and then just never came back. So I mean, like they look like real artists until they're not sometimes. And so there's all these scams running at the same time, and I think that makes it really difficult for the indie market.
Joel?
That's a lot you guys said, so I don't really
Follow that one, buddy.
I don't really have much to add other than, as Think Tank, we are a software as a service for licensing music to film, TV, and other projects like that. But I also have a artist label services company with my twin brother, and we have a distribution deal through a major label. So I guess our content is considered probably 80%, of the non-fraud stuff, which is great. But yeah, I mean, the indie landscape is just so different. Like, what is it that means success to you, etc. What is it that you want to succeed in the music industry? Do you want to actually sell records? Do you want to, what is your goal exactly? What does the indie landscape provide for you in that goal, seeking that goal? Usually it's around what teams you can build around it, what technologies you can use these days, and what force multipliers are there to actually help you reach your goal. So I know Sherry's going over some of these tools later this week with the AI tools that you can do for force multipliers and creation and all this cool stuff. That's really kind of what I feel is the indie market in the future. I think most of the major labels are living in the indie market, like trying to get this credibility that's you don't have when you're on a major label. So being on a major label is not the marker of success necessarily. It's actually being like, am I able to pull this off? Am I able to do it? More than ever, the barrier to entry is very low. It's just everything else is very hard. And that's the truth, is that you can be in the market, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. And then what does success exactly look like for you? And so the artists that I've been dealing with, it's a varied question, and it's like, where do I fit in? Where do I fit into that?
Almost like an existential question at this point.
It totally is. And it's like, let's help you figure out what that endpoint is, and then get to that point first, and then get to that next point. But what does the music market look like overall? It's like every day is new. I mean, there's 120,000 records coming out every single day. It's an overflow. How do you get heard? How do you actually branch out or reach whatever your success level is in that noisy environment?
When you said, Andrew, you talked about kind of a dimmer view, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
It's not all roses here. But when you had talked about the consolidation, and perhaps you don't see the growth, do you think that consolidation, this also goes to you too, Sherry, that consolidation was inevitable? Because I kind of look at it like the way the craft beer industry was, where it just, every town had a craft beer industry, independent, and then all of a sudden Budweiser comes through and starts eating up, buying up stuff to hold legitimate, symbols in the industry. Was this inevitable where we're at, Andrew? When you talk about kind of how maybe it's not growing, that it's actually, they're getting their market back.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was inevitable. I think that it makes sense that in an industry where three players control so much of it, they're going to preserve, they have the bankroll to preserve it, and they have the ability to just buy versus build, right? And so I think that and everyone has a number in their head. Like if someone comes and offers you 20 years worth of profits now, like you might just say, sure. The other reality is that to make an artist success, I used to break artists back in the 2000s, and still occasionally will help artists out. And I think that there's like 1,000 things you have to do successfully. And I think the bigger the independent label becomes, the harder it is to do all of those things successfully for each one of their acts. And I think it becomes easier to some extent when you're in a major system, because there's so many seats to be filled at the table that they can provide right away. So I think part of it's also just an economy of scale as you get bigger. And I think that it becomes an efficiency game. And so I think maybe it's inevitable. It doesn't have to be, but I think that it becomes sort of aligned, like everyone's values or everyone's sort of incentives become aligned when you get bigger, because they want more market share, they have the bankroll to provide you, you might need more efficiency, you might need more help. So I don't know if it's inevitable, but it feels like it's definitely aligned. And in any industry, not just music, when you have a bunch of big players, I think telcos, they just go around buying everything. It's just how the world works. It's capitalist. So, yeah.
I want to say too is, a lot of the artists that I interview, especially on the local and regional level, they always ask me, at what point do I stop DIY, or do I need to stop DIY? I've noticed certain bands that are very successful. A good example is Future Birds, Indie Rock Act. They've been able to sign deals where they own the publishing, but they have a label, an indie label, do the distribution.
Yeah.
It seems like a great model.
It is a great model.
You keep your songs, and somebody else is dealing with getting it out there.
Yeah, it's like instead of a record deal, it's a licensing model, and they're gonna earn off it for as long as your term is, and it's way fair. And that's what I recommend people do, because you own your art, you own your destiny. You can walk away with it and work with somebody else in 15 years or whatever the terms are.
That can also be a trap though, so you have to
Yeah.
watch out for the distribution company, because in that case, for example, you might be exclusive to them until
Yeah,
you
I'm not
repay
talking
that.
exclusive.
And then there's like, now you want to put your next album out, be their
Yeah.
choice, but to go with the partner you already
This is,
have.
yeah, I'm talking record per record, which is normally like with a distribution deal, it's normally record per record unless you're receiving an advance, and that's like when you're almost signed to a record deal, almost a pseudo record deal, but it's, an advance of how much money you'd be making typically in 3 years if you stop putting record out tomorrow, or putting music out tomorrow. So there is, pseudo label deals that come with the label services, the artist services that are built into the distributors now. So distributors realize that, they need to do this stuff in order for the records to sell, because there's so much noise coming out.
Yeah, I wonder about that when you think about the DIY model. I've always personally thought DIY until you can't lifted anymore.
Right.
The idea being like, do it all yourself until it's taken away from
You
you.
don't have to do it alone, do it
Yeah.
yourself, it's just we get a team.
Yeah, make sure that the art's being done, that's the
Yeah.
most important thing.
Yeah.
At what point, there's definitely musicians in this audience, but at what point would you say to start sliding out of the DIY, or do you stick with DIY, or is it a hybrid between the DIY? What do you recommend?
Is that the question?
And anybody wants to jump
I
in?
think you answer the people that brought you there. So I'm like all about loyalty. If the team that got you there, and you're being successful, like ride with the team. And in my opinion, recognize that everyone has their growth journey. Just like you're gonna learn to be a better artist, and you're gonna learn to have stage presence, and you're gonna learn how to deal with shit that's happening on stage. Like your manager is also gonna learn how to deal with you, how to deal with these new partners. Everyone's capable of learning. And I think if you stay loyal to the people that have been with you from the beginning, everyone can win together. I think the thing I see the most is like some manager comes and they're like, oh, I manage whatever, Ed Sheeran, and like I could do all these big things for you. And then you leave your manager and you leave your team and you leave these other people because you think that the grass is greener. And 9 times out of 10, the grass isn't greener. 9 times out of 10, it fails for you. Sure. And I think the special like bonds and relationship and the being in the trenches with these people, like it's good for them too. It doesn't have to just be good for you. And so I'm always on board with sticking with whatever got you there. So if you got discovered early and you're on a major and that's working, then stay. If you are an indie that blows up, why can't everyone win together and you stay indie? Like I think it's more about the team you built for yourself as opposed to like jumping ship to something that's better.
Can I add quickly? I think, yeah, the term DIY is very hot and hyped up, but just so looking outside of music, like if you told like a startup founder that the default is to DIY, like you're a solo founder, you can't build a team, you just do it all yourself, do as much as you can until you essentially like burn out or working 24/7, and then at that point you have to sign to the equivalent of a major label, which is getting going straight to like private equity investment or something. It doesn't, it's not realistic. And I feel like I'm gonna say this a lot of things not being so black and white or binary. Like any entrepreneur has to build a team and has to do it methodically over time. No one is truly doing it themselves. Any music project that is out there is a result of some collaborative group community effort. So I guess that's one. And then two, I guess, yeah, outside of like business models or value flows, I do think a lot about like mental models and assumptions and the psychology behind why people make certain decisions. And while there are so many more opportunities and like choices that independent artists can make in their careers, I think the psychology of getting signed, like the mental model that success is getting signed, is still actually quite prevalent in the industry. Like we've been talking a lot about distribution and label services. Like I've been talking with a lot of distributors for an article we just published today, actually recently, and something that kept coming up is like when an artist reaches a certain like middle tier, like they're making sustainable income from streaming, very often that's when these companies see a challenge of these artists getting poached by traditional deals.
Yes.
Yeah, even if the economics are not in their favor at all. Whether it's the clout that's associated with getting signed, or maybe very often they'll get like an upfront advance as part of like the recording contract, and just having that cash is really important to them short term, but they're not thinking long term about their career. So like the psychology of being signed versus the psychology of like I am running my own company.
Right.
I am the leader, one of like the creative strategic leader, CEO of my own company, and I'm going to build a team that will help me sustain that vision long term, whatever that team may be. And maybe a label deal is the best thing down the line, but I think a lot of artists will still like default to that thinking without considering all the other options available to them.
I like that there's something there, because that actually made me think of something like I'm a 5-time founder, raised like 150 million for startups. And one thing that I see with startups all the time is that as soon as they get funded, they think they've made it.
Yes.
And I'm like, your customers don't care that you raised money, they care that you're delivering a product and a value.
Problems
And
just
like,
started.
where you raise your money from is just for yourself and LinkedIn. Like no one actually cares that you're selling to. And so the same thing when you go to a major, it's like, I don't know any fans that are like, oh, I love this guy because he's on Warner.
Yeah.
You know, like, no fans like, oh shit, that's that hot UMG artist right there.
Yeah.
You know, like they care about who you are as an artist and following your art, not like where you're signed. And I think that that is so interesting because I think of majors, whether they'll shoot me for saying this or not, as a VC, they're venture capitalists. I'm gonna place 10 bets, 1 out of 10 is gonna make it, 9 of them are gonna fail. I'm gonna put maybe over the course of their 3 albums, $10 million into each artist. I need 1 to pay back $100 million to make the portfolio work, and the other 9 can fail, and I don't care, write it off. So venture capital works the same way. We make 60 investments in a portfolio. We expect roughly 1% to pay back the fund, a bunch to sort of be duds, pay back their money, and around 70% to fail. And so we just expect failure when we write the checks.
Sure.
And so I think no different from a major label perspective, and I think the mental model that an artist used to think is like, they're at the starting, all they've done, whether they did it themselves or signed to a major, is get themselves to the race. Like they are
Starting
now
block, yeah.
at the starting block, and they have a huge race to run still, but they have not made it. They've literally just they've just entered the competition. And I think that that's the same fallacy with startups. Like they all love talking about how much money they raised, and then you see them raise 200 million and fail in 2 years. And it's like, that's not success. Like that's not the barometer by which we should determine whether you've made it.
Yeah, I think you got to pick what blowing up is to you. Like, what's success look like to you? Is it being sustainable? Is it having a career that you can live off of?
For a long period of time.
Yeah, a long period of time, because a lot of these bigger labels will just give you a check, and that's an advance that you have to pay back, and you have to make your videos off of, and you have to go record, and it's not free money, right? A much better model is to, not, and then also they own 80% of your art, if they're not doing a long-term licensing deal. So how is that good, for a traditional label, right? When you have all these alternatives, like if my brother's been in the major label business for 25 years, he would be like, why are you here? Like when bands would come in, they're already making $1 million a year. He's like, you're gonna make $3 million in the next 2 years, like, why are you here? If you leave my office, you go over to Atlantic, they're gonna write you the same check. They're gonna say the same stuff. But then when you go through the building, everybody in the building has to give a crap about you. They're like, sales has to care, marketing has to care, radio has to be aligned, playlisting and sync. Otherwise, it's not going to succeed. You'll just be like another thing that an A&R guy brought in, and is it truly art? And that's the other thing, is that they sign a lot of things that are actionable, but not necessarily artistic, because you could come in and like, you've done 1 million, 2 million streams, then come in and do a performance and completely share with that, and not be an artist.
You were talking before, Andrew, about just different portals people go through, obviously YouTube, social media, things of that nature. And I asked because I know there's musicians, I know some of these folks that are out there, how much should people be focusing on content versus their art? Because I know there's a lot of burnout that I notice with bands that will tell me that I'm focusing way too much on my content versus actually getting the art created.
The truth is I don't know the answer to that. And the reason is I feel like every artist that we've ever broke, at least in my experience. So I found a kid at a bonfire in Nantucket in 2007, decided to make him a college rapper. I had no idea what I was doing, but I had a bunch of Facebook games that I had built that we had all these college kids, and I thought I could probably get the college kids to go and promote this artist. And it turned out it worked. He went #1 iTunes, #7 Billboard with no label. We held them there, all genres, and we held them there for a while. And everyone thought we cheated because at the time, all they did was email and paid. I had an asset I thought we could leverage, right? Every time we've broken acts successfully, it's like we've had one big piece of the puzzle that we thought could carry 70 or 80% of the water, and the rest of it was just sort of filling in the blanks to have a mixed sort of strategy for that specific artist. A couple years ago, I built a fan engagement app that we spun out of VTAP, and we had like 1 million downloads, no marketing, and a bunch of the top fan clubs. And so I thought, I bet I could launch my own song just for fun. So I went to them and said, hey, I'm gonna make this country music song. I promise it won't suck. Will you please help us? And it was like the BTS fan army and One Direction and Louis Tomlinson's like his fan army. And what I what I had as an asset were all these fans. But then I just had to, okay, oh, what song can I make that doesn't suck? By the way, I was a horrible singer, it turns out. I didn't realize I wasn't very good, and I was in the recording studio, like, we re-recorded 7 times. I'm like, this isn't getting any better. And it just was not great. And it took me a year and a half, but we got there. But when we released the song, we had 2 million fans lined up to stream the song because they all wanted to be supportive. And we went number 4 in the US country music single. And we broke, but the thing was our art sucked. I had no follow-up act. I had no ability to capture those fans and convert them to anything. So we charted, we did well short term, but there was nothing there, right? So none of those fans could go anywhere. They couldn't experience us live. We couldn't do anything to engage them because it was just like a one-trick pony. And so what I learned in that aspect was that where in the early 2000s, late 2000s, 2010s, you could basically create a spark and hope it would take off. You now need to have a more sustained game plan for 8, 12, 16 weeks out and how you're going to follow that up, because the spark won't just take on its own and then everyone's demanding that you be there. Like, you actually have to keep feeding it and feeding the fire to go. And I think that's a very different strategy than I would have predicted before. And so every act that I've seen be successful has had something that's unique, and when it's working, it just works. And so sometimes it's content related, sometimes they're content. There's a band, I told you, sorry I'm talking so much. There was a band we were talking about earlier with the guy that worked on my house with the HVAC system, and then he asked if I meet his grandson, and when I met his grandson, he was pretty rad. So I was like, let me help you. And we started helping him. His social, I saw him this week actually, and I was like, your social media posts are so annoying. Like, every post is basically, congratulations, you found your new favorite independent artist, calling out fans of like every single other band. And I'm like, I might unfollow you. But it's working. And the thing is, it's like driving real fans and real engagement. He's on all the Explore pages, and his numbers have climbed so much organically from that type of content that we have 8 record deals offered. And that's like pretty unheard of, to like shop a kid quickly and get 8 deals. And it's, but you look at that and you're like, but I find it annoying. Like, if I was your follower, I'd want to unfollow you almost immediately because content's annoying, but it's working. And so I think everyone needs to just look at themselves and say, like, what's the piece that I have that's working that I can build from? What's your pillar of your plan? I think when you try to like copy what everyone else is doing, it never really works for you because it's not authentic, or a million other people are doing it. Sorry to go there.
No, I completely agree with all of that. I just have a few points to build off of that. Another theme that I really like is coming up in this conversation is comparisons to startups or like companies outside the music industry. So for any business, you have a product and you need distribution. You have to get it into the hands of customers. You have to get it in front of potential customers, in this case, listeners or fans. So if you have a product without distribution, no one's gonna see it, no one's gonna buy it. And then conversely, if you have great distribution for your product, but the product isn't good, kind of as you were giving some examples of, you might see some spike, but it just won't be sustained long term. So I really think you need both. It's really not do I have to focus on content over my craft? Like, if you do that, then I think the results will speak for themselves. It probably will, fall short. And the exact ratio of focus will be different for everyone. But another important thing, I think, thinking about independent artist strategy, something that we've been doing a lot of research on at Water Music is like music data strategy. So with so much like data that can be collected about the way that music is consumed or engaged with or bought, how do people make sense of it? What tools do they lean on to make sense of it? And the reality, a lot of independent artists and their team space is that they just don't have the budget a lot of the time to pay for a lot of tools that like bigger record labels or music companies will have access to get the same data. Content is a really low cost, almost free way to make your own data. And so what I mean by that is if you don't have a budget and you don't really know what people will engage with, will resonate with. Even just like small experiments of like posting some things online and seeing what resonates, that's a way to literally create your own data and learn and experiment in an environment that is really risky. And you need to kind of run your own experiments, see, try even just a small campaign for a little bit and see what does and doesn't work, and iterate, iterate continuously from there. So that's kind of how I see it, as like a strategic way to make an otherwise really unpredictable, risky industry a little less risky. It's just by continuing to put yourself out there and learn from the feedback that you get.
One of the things I've noticed with a lot of the bands that I work with is obviously most people still want to make a full album, but now they will tease the album, they'll do 3 singles, one every 3 to 4 weeks, and then drop the album full by like month 2.
Mhm.
Just because as we've seen now is you got a full album, you get a quick spike, and then it's forgotten in a week.
Yeah.
So I've really noticed, especially in a lot of different genres now, that model of 1 single, 3 weeks, second single, 3 weeks, third single, and then the album. Are you seeing a lot of that starting to?
Well, we follow Apple's best practices, so they're like darlings of the industry. So it's, they say every 6 weeks, right? So we release a record every 6 weeks with some reading room. Sometimes the record might need longer than 6 weeks. The first record we put out from the album or the EP. Second record might be 5 to 6 weeks out. Third record might be 5 to 6 weeks out. It might be even sooner or later, depending on how successful the first 2 are. And we try to, let the algorithm do what it needs to do for those first 2 singles, and then we engage it with editorial and all the other stuff with the human beings that we know inside the buildings. So we're like the counterparts for the artists that don't have the connections of the DSPs. And typically we can say, hey, look at the proofs here, because we run advertising on the releases we're doing. Because so many songs come out every day, the only way you can really, rise above the pile of stuff is to find the audience that actually cares about you and put your material in front of them, leading to actual followers. So yeah, I think that's a good plan.
Well, it's interesting too is I've noticed a lot, especially with the indie rocks.
Yeah.
More EPs than LPs.
Yeah, EPs absolutely.
Like instead of, they'll record when they have time off tour.
Yeah.
So they'll get 3 songs done here, 3 songs done here. Instead of sitting on those first 3 songs for a year and a half, get them the hell out.
Yeah.
Put them out.
Yes, you got to keep momentum. That's the thing. Is like with my business myself, like St. Tank. Nobody knew what St. Tank was until we started doing a blog and a newsletter every week, relentlessly, until it grew to this behemoth amount of people that we're communicating with, that now know the brand, that know the offering, that know everything, because we're not speaking just about us. We're speaking about the scene, about everybody else around us. And I think newsletters and what Cherry was saying earlier is mail's never going away, right? We have all these tools that we're using now to get people to go to Spotify, get people to go to YouTube and consume here, consume there. But it's all distracting. If you can really just capture the audience that really cares about you and sell to them over and over, that's a sustainable career.
Can I very quickly add a very specific anecdote about water music? Because in terms of our business, also for more context, our primary business is a paid membership. So we have over 1,000 paying subscribers from across the music industry, everyone from people working at like major music companies to independent artists and managers. And so we've thought a lot about the theory that a lot of people hear about, the marketing funnel. Like you have the kind of passive audience that might first discover you, when they first hear about your name or your brand, in our case, Water Music, down to the loyal lifetime paying subscriber. The reality, whenever I look at our Google Analytics page of how people convert, it is so messy. There's no linear thing of this person clicked this page and then immediately was I need to subscribe. The reality, kind of what we were speaking to, is they click this article and then that sparks their curiosity, and then over the course of the next 3 months, they'll click on 10 to 15 other pages being I wonder what they're what Water Music is working on now. And then something clicks, we publish something that happens to really strike a nerve with them. And then finally, after 3 to 6 months, you're like, oh, okay, I'll subscribe, but then they actually become a lot more loyal, and we've been able to grow the membership a lot more organically from there. So translating that to like artist marketing, I think what makes music so unique as a product is that there are literally hundreds of different places you can discover it. And like as an artist, you really can't control that. And that's definitely a big challenge, but I think also really interesting opportunity for music marketing standpoint is kind of building the narrative around your music in many different places over a longer period of time. I think that is the winning strategy even more than thinking really short-term things about things like virality.
Well, let's open it up to the audience Q&A portion of this segment. I think there's a microphone out there. Raise your hand if you have a question. Don't be shy. Should we come right over here?
Check, check. Oh, that's a loud one. Probably a question for Andrew, but anybody, please feel free to step in. Do you have a sense for, like right now, playlisting services are really popular. You can pitch them all the time. Do you have a sense for which ones are like at all costs avoid, or ones that you feel are like, yeah, go for it?
I don't have a sense for which ones to avoid necessarily, because even if you get playlisted, some playlists are fraudulent, right? And it becomes, we catch it on the other side, like from the platform side, which then I'm not allowed to disclose like which ones are bad and which ones are good. But I will say, there's a company called Song Tools that I used, and I really like them because they put a lot of effort into making sure that they weren't propping up fake playlists. And then when I did my song that released, I used them. And we got like 100 legitimate placements. Now they weren't huge numbers. I think one of the other things I was pretty surprised by is I just assumed if you got playlists, you do big numbers. My song was listed on top 100 country, wild country.
But all the way at the bottom.
No, I was top 10. I was like, I think I came in at number 9 on wild country, and then I was there for 10 months. And collectively, that playlist maybe only gave me 300,000 streams or something on Spotify. And so I just assumed it would have been millions. So I guess my thing was I thought it would drive more, and it really didn't drive as much as I thought it would. And I guess the strategy talking to other artists and stuff is that you need to have lots of songs playlisted across lots of places. And so you need like a really long sustained strategy for that. So I don't know, I like Song Tools because everyone that playlists my songs actually gave real feedback. Yeah. And sometimes it was like, this music sucks. And I was like, okay, cool, at least someone listened to it. And then sometimes it was like, this is rad, I'm adding it to my cross-country playlist. And like, I'd get like 1,000 streams from what I presume was real people, listening to this playlist. So I liked it because it felt real and organic. It didn't drive, I maybe got 50,000 streams across it over the course of a year, but I thought it was really interesting, and like I could tell that they were real, which was like really impactful for me. If I had been like a really serious artist, I'd rather be in front of 50,000 people that were real than 300,000 people that passively listened on a playlist and didn't really seem to engage with me at all. So it felt like, from me, I thought Song Tools was really, really cool, and I would use them 100% again. And then the other way, I always think about ways to hack. So how I got on all these playlists wasn't a playlist pitching tool. I actually bought the Nashville billboard that like right in front of Music Row, and I got the names of all the playlist editors, and I posted like Urban Outlaws loves each individual person with just their name. And it was just rotating through different people. And my thought was, whoever's in Nashville is going to be driving down the street and be like, why the heck is that person on this sign? And then send them a picture and be like, do you know you're on the Nashville sign right now? And like, that's exactly what happened. All these playlist editors freaked out, and they started calling me like, you can't put my name on billboards. And they were all really mad at me. I remember the label calling me like, you gotta remove this immediately. Like, this is not good. And I was like, well, you told me to do my own marketing. So I did my own marketing, and they're like, this is making us all look bad. Like, take this down right now. But they all playlisted me. So, at the end of the day, I guess it worked. But I think my point of that was just be creative and find ways to reach them maybe that aren't like the normal pathway for them. And that was, I reached in a physical space that I thought everyone who knows them would be texting them, being like, why is your name on this billboard? And immediately the next question is, who the hell is Urban Outlaws? Because that's like the first thing you're gonna think. And so, anyway, to answer your question, song tools I think is great. All the other ones I probably wouldn't pay for because I just don't know them and don't trust them well enough, and I'd rather just do it myself.
Hi, thank you. So my question is, obviously y'all are in a niche in the business industry, which I find is really cool. How did you orient yourself into whatever niche you're in? And how long have you been doing your current work for? And like, what does your team look like? Like, who's like keeping you motivated in the office? What's your team look like?
I can start with that. Yeah, I've thought a lot about this because I've been writing and researching about music and tech for almost a decade. Next year will be 10 years. The concept of like music tech journalism and reporting is like very niche. Like that as a career did not really exist like 10, 15 years ago. So yeah, this is very near and dear to me. I would say it takes both a lot of like internal reflection and then just knowing your own passions and interests. And then I think the best niche businesses that are like run by individual people match that passion with what the market needs. So like being really intentional about like the kind of work that you want to do, the kind of lifestyle you want to have, and then talking to as many people as possible and trying to understand like where the middle of that Venn diagram is. And then in terms of my team, we're a very lean team. There are only 2 full-time people, myself and our CTO, Alex, who's in the back corner. Shout out to Alex. And then our model, so we have a paid newsletter, but we also do a lot of consulting with startups and also bigger music companies to help them navigate music tech strategy. Those are project-based, and so we have a rotating cast of analysts from like around the music industry. Very often they're like doing other industry jobs like managing artists or working at other companies. So we have a really large network of like analysts, and we kind of assemble them per project. So it's pretty dynamic.
Anybody else out there? Don't be shy. Okay.
Hey everybody, Liz Brigham, part of the Confluence team. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate y'all. Also, thank you for validating an argument I've been making for a long time about the intersection of the VC world and music labels, because I've been in entrepreneurship for a really long time, and I think it's very clear on that front. Going back to that comparison that you were making, Sherry, to other types of businesses, one of my favorite quotations from the founders of Airbnb is "do things that don't scale." This is fascinating to me about how, a lot more of the sort of direct-to-consumer and fan, finally, these artists have access to fan data that they can, engage with and build these things up. So I'm curious, much like your billboard example, what are the things that you have seen independent artists do to engage fans that technically don't scale, and then eventually get to a point where they can use technology as a force multiplier or other things?
I was gonna say, Joe's actually a good friend, so I would say that the context for that was in the very beginning, you do things that don't scale, because you don't know who your market is yet, and you don't know exactly how to systematize or put a framework in place for something that you can't predict. So when you know you need a framework is when it's predictable, when there's a high enough ceiling, and that you feel like you're gonna know what the results are on the other end. So the beginning part, you're just doing anything that works. To answer your question, one of my favorite ones was my friend Jake was managing this act who had failed for 6 albums in a row, trying to do the social media game where they try to do like build the follow campaigns and all that stuff. And Jake really thought he was great, so they went the opposite way. They erased him off the internet, basically, removed everything. And then I never forget, this was back when cash still ruled things. And we showed up at Coachella, and the night before they were all stamping $1 bills with his logo. And they went to Coachella and actually traded the $1 bills with all the food vendors for 20s and 100s, so they never lost any money. But then they had these $1 bills floating with his logo all around Coachella. And everybody was like, who is this guy's zoo? Like, what is happening? And then before the end of the 2 weeks, he'd been booked for 3 shows, each for over 25 grand each, because no one could figure out who he was and thought he was like the hot new shit. And then Unfaded came out and he like blew up as a huge artist. And so it was like one of these weird things where you wouldn't, like, it's not scalable. It was creative, technically illegal for defacing the dollar bill. Like all the things you wouldn't really want to do, but like worked. And Jake was amazing at that. He also broke Cruella, which was a big band. And how he broke them, they had $4 left in their bank account. They were washing their hair with laundry soap. And he took this old chain from a bunch of assistants talking about a Skrillex thing, and then changed it so that it looked like they were talking about Cruella with Skrillex, and then attached a song that kind of looked like it could have been the new remixed version from Skrillex, and then had someone he knew forward it to an assistant that was obviously like a bit of a gossip. And within 2 hours, it was on every major music site. And everyone thought Cruella was doing this remix with Skrillex, and next thing you know, Cruella blew up. And so it's like finding like these creative ways to sort of like position your band or your act or your brand in a way that no one else is thinking. Very guerrilla, but I think it's unscalable and it's always different for every artist. But I thought he was really good at finding clever ways to sort of fool people.
You want to add? We got a minute left. You want to add?
Oh, 1 minute, oh my gosh. Yeah,
You're on the clock.
those examples, I'm a big zoo fan, so I think those are all really great examples. I would quickly add, I guess, touring in general, I think there have been many examples of, I guess, artists who have tried to skip the step of doing things that don't scale and then pay the price in low ticket sales. I think especially this year, there have been many examples of artists who have tried to sell out like arenas for tours, but they either had not toured in several years or.
Black Keys.
Sorry?
Yeah, Black Keys, yeah.
I think,
Jennifer Lopez.
yep, J-Lo, unfortunately, with her as well, or like artists who are too early in their career. I've been following Chappell Roan super closely. I think she's a really interesting example of like someone who like probably could sell an arena if she wanted to, but she's like not skipping any steps right now. She's actually playing a lot of like smaller festivals, smaller venues, and like really focusing on building the core fan base first. So I think like the whole touring, industry at large, and the importance of like making or breaking trust at those smaller shows first to then have payoff for like years, decades after, I think is overall a good example of that.
All right. Well, let's thank Sherry, Andrew, and Joel. Appreciate y'all being here today.
Let's give this panel one more round of applause. Thank you very much. We especially welcome Joel and Sherry visiting us from New York. Andrew coming from Vancouver to be here for this conference. And of course, Eric from Western North Carolina. Thank you all for being here so much. Another panel coming up in 10 minutes. Don't forget your Dasani water or your Sprite.